it's too pro-Trump. And I'm like, too pro-Trump? I said, well, how can a portrait not be pro the subject? I mean, that's what a portrait is. It's all about the subject. When you're being an artist, you can't be a businessman. You can't be an entrepreneur. I didn't look for this battle. I was stunned when it happened. I'm made for it.
All right, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Raw and Relentless. I've got Julian on. Julian, thanks for coming on today.
Thanks for having me, Bo. I love the title of your show, and I couldn't wait to get on.
Thank you. So why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself, what you do, what you're all about?
Well, I'll give you a sort of snapshot and then allow you to focus on whichever part you'd like. But, born in London, England, in a town called Richmond upon Thames. But by the age of 2, I had moved to southern Spain with my family to a town called Marbella. My parents had gone on vacation and driven all the way down the coast of Spain and to Portugal. And they fell in love with the whole area back in the 70s. It was pristine. It was exquisite. It was not London. And my father, being an entrepreneur, he was both in the rag trade at the time and a property developer, or in real estate, as we'd say here. He was determined because the fax machine had just been invented, and he was like, I think I can run my fax machine from the golf course here in southern Spain, drink gin and tonics, and that's what he did. And he did, and he started. He was pioneering. He was multitasking. He was out on the golf course and sending faxes back to London. So it was an irresistible draw, southern Spain in general, but southern Spain is magnificent. And so that's where I grew up. It was a beautiful place to grow up. Half of my life I grew up in Spain, approximately about 26 years, and then the rest of it here in the United States, mostly in New York State.
Okay, very good. And so now you're kind of... You're a very diverse person. You're an artist, and then you're also an entrepreneur as well, correct?
Correct. Yeah, I have done a lot of things. My daughter calls me a Renaissance man. As a creative, I am always curious. Since I was a little boy, it's all I can remember. I was never running around with the kids. I was just probably off to the side taking apart a stereo unit, trying to work out how it was made and how it functioned. And so I'm just a curious person, and that's led me to do all sorts of things. My personal passions are what guide me today. I've always been creative on my mother's side. Her father was a painter and an engineer by trade. And so I have the sort of creative gifts from that side. So artist, author, free speech advocate here in the United States. I have had a calling to ministry for many years as well. I've preached the gospel for 25 years. So I have a diverse background and wide field of experience. And making money, I'm someone that's, I believe in paying my own way. And so I've worked for myself as an entrepreneur since the age of 18 years old. I left school actually at the age of 16 saying that I'd never work for anyone. And I just, for some reason, I had that inclination. And although I have had some jobs along the way, most of my adult life has been as an entrepreneur from the age of 18 onwards. And I have been a serial entrepreneur, and a very wonderful school of maturation has been those experiences.
And so as an entrepreneur, what is your go-to right now for your income or your business?
Well, I've chosen, and I usually default to this direction. I always seem to choose the hardest things because I always want to be challenged. I want to defy myself and defy the system. And as an artist, it's known. Artists, that you can use the life of Van Gogh, for example. It's a brutally difficult life. He didn't sell a single painting in his life, not a single one. Everything happened after he died. And now Van Goghs are like priceless. So as an artist in today's world, you want to paint, you want to create, you want people to love your work, you want people to buy your work and collect your work. But that is an extremely, extremely difficult path. most parents, even myself included, will never advise their children to go into those fields. You'll always, I advised all of my kids, like, go to college, get a degree, so you can have a fallback and not be suffering like me, because I've gone through a lot in my journey. But at the end of it, it's all been good. It's all been educational. So I've tried in the last few years, really since I think about 2000. I started, I would say, 1998. 2008. When I began to think about opening an art business. And it really is an extremely difficult endeavor for me as an entrepreneur. And to this day, it is not something that I can say I have succeeded in, because when you are an artist, you have to be an artist. And when you're being an artist, you can't be a businessman. You can't be an entrepreneur. And so every time I've opened galleries, and I've had 3 studio galleries in the last 4 or 5 years. In New York, where I'm standing, is in my art studio. I have my own space here. It's an amazing building. I have thousands of square feet. It's great. It's affordable. It's my own space. I opened a gallery. But up here, there isn't the economy to buy art, particularly what I have. So we moved. We went near Washington, D.C. We went to Virginia in a town called Lynchburg, where our kids were doing school. And in the last year and a half, I've been in Spain, in my hometown, which we went to because my mother sadly got sick and she passed. And we ended up staying, and then we opened an art studio. But each time I did it, I suffered, because my business kicks in. I want to run a business, and then my art fails because I'm the one making the product. And so it's like self-defeating. And up until today, I have decided that I will be an artist and sell from my studio online without all the grief of the layers of business that I have had to and have done in the past. I mean, I was a successful cabinet maker for many years, designed and built furniture. That was my most successful business, which I had really great growth in and opportunity. But I think art, especially if it's very personal to you, it remains a very studio-focused endeavor, as people buy it from online or collectors and that say, but it just doesn't fit into a business model for me right now.
That makes complete sense. I mean, so much of business is moving online anyways, and you're right. It's a completely different mindset to be an artist versus a business owner, where they're very much alike, but the mindset is, in the end, very, very different.
It is, yeah. I think most artists that I know, that I have read about, they are absolutely lousy at business, lousy. And not that I am. My mind is set that it's hard. I can do a lot of things at once, multitask, but you never really do them well. When you really want to do something well, it's got to be whole-souled. That's as your title of your show is Raw and Relentless Pursuit of that one goal, objective. If you do that as an artist, everything else blurs, and so everything else suffers. And so, but there have been a few, and one American painter in particular, I think he was the most successful commercializing his own art, which was a painter that he turned his industry into having people painting his paintings and him basically just signing them and selling them and shipping them all. I mean, it was just a whole creative way of, making a business out of art. I cringe at that, to be honest. I'm like, it's just not me. It's my painting, it's my heart, it's my vision, it's my creativity, my signature, and I want my collector, I want the person that has that to have that, not something that someone else did. And now you could go to China even, they have cities dedicated to these art factories where they just they put a painting on an easel and someone paints the bush and they hand it on and they paint the bit and they hand it on. It's and great. They're making amazing artwork, but at the same time, it's not particularly and personally me. So yeah, going back to that, China, the art producer. So, Bo, art can be many things and on many levels. These people over there, and they can make it. They're amazingly talented and trained, and they can create beautiful paintings. There's no doubt. It's a form of original. It's real as art. But for me, I have my own belief, and I want to pursue that. So that's why it's difficult, but that's what I love to do. Right now, I'm in my author mode because I'm releasing my book, which is coming out in the second edition very soon, and so I've been very busy writing. So I'm in full word creative mode, which is a remarkable place to be. It's very exciting.
And what's the book about?
The book is called Odious and Cerberus, An American Immigrant's Odyssey and His Free Speech Legal War Against Smithsonian Corruption. It's a journey that I've been on for 8 years now, ongoing. It's been national headlines quite a few times, and it's art-related. It's all about a painting of mine and free speech, and I'm becoming an American citizen, and all of the intricacies of coming up against bias and institutional hostility against ideology that they dislike when they are not in a position to do that, and then me suing them for years, trying to straighten out what's crooked. So that's what I've been up to with that book, and it's coming out on the 21st, once again, second edition.
That's very interesting. Yeah, because it seems very passionate about the whole constitutional rights and free speech, according to your bios. So is this kind of what prompted the whole passion behind that, is what you've been dealing with the Smithsonian? And can you kind of give some backstory as to that?
Absolutely. As a response, again, to your description on your show, the passionate or the pursuit and passionate pursuit of truth. I have always been a truth seeker. Like I said, as a boy, I was trying to work out how things were made. How does, the idea, always pursuing the truth. And so life has taught me, and I'm only really interested in those things. And so whatever I get involved in on becoming an American citizen, I take that very seriously. What does it mean? I then discover all these wonderful rights, and the Bill of Rights, and the Declaration of Independence, and the U.S. Constitution, and I'm like, oh my goodness, this is remarkable. This is wonderful. It's life-changing for me. I became a citizen in 2015, and so I have a great affection for ideas that are true, for liberty, for freedom, because truth will ultimately set us free, as Jesus Christ said. You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. And so human freedom, human development, creativity, all of those aspects of who we are fully released when we have freedom, and freedom of speech, freedom of religion. The Constitution is protecting those things. So we live in a season of human existence where creativity has been allowed to flourish for good and for bad in any way, in many ways. But those laws are there that protect us and allow us to do that, whereas other places on earth, it's not the same. They don't have the freedoms, and artists will always be struggling to be expressive because government will be trying to control it if they paint a picture of something forbidden, God forbid. So America's not like that. So all of these things, America to me is the ultimate culmination of the pioneering, entrepreneurial, creative mindset where people fled oppression, they fled persecution, religious oppression, they came for opportunity, and they just dove into this blank canvas of opportunity, and an amazing story developed of a people who are, by what I came to love, greatly entrepreneurial and bold and courageous to do great creative things. So that ties into who I am as an artist, and then the issues that I came up against with my painting, which was a portrait back then of candidate Donald Trump running for office. As a New Yorker, I had been familiar with Trump. He had run for governor, or not run, but shown interest to become governor of New York State in 2014. I was familiar with him and his name from living in New York City and seeing either a roadside sign on the West Side Highway of Trump had cleaned the next mile of highway, or his name, huge buildings, and this, so it's bold and just real, this a very American thing as I saw it as an immigrant. So it was fascinating to me. But once he showed interest for governor, my friends and I up here in upstate New York, we were like, wow, a businessman might be able to turn the tide on the economic climate. More businesses leave New York State than come here. It's like an exodus. And so we wanted to see that change. And we thought a businessman could be the answer to that with name recognition and, a no-nonsense, straight-shooter type attitude. We thought that could be good. Well, he didn't. He didn't get the support of the Republican committee, and then he went on from there. And I've been non-political my whole life. This was the first time stepping into anything like this. I'd never voted before. I became a citizen that year, 2015. But I was inspired in the summer of 2015 to paint a portrait of this man. And I hesitated a lot for weeks because I knew the implications that would come with it. It was a remarkable personal experience that I had. And then circumstances would come that would indicate to me that I had to paint this painting, and that this man was going to become president, and that, the 17 other candidates on the stage at that time, he was going to win. And most people thought I was nuts. They laughed at me. They ridiculed me. I began to show my painting. They hung a copy of it in Trump Tower. It was a story like this. I met the man. I go through this whole process. I begin to campaign. I take my artwork across the country. It was seen in a lot of places. One of the major places it was seen was in L.A. at the Art of Politics art show, who was curated by Yossi Sergeant, who was the patron and inspiration behind the Obama Hope poster from 2008 and 2013. The artist is the name Shepard Fairey. He was a graffiti artist. He was a young guy doing graffiti in the back streets of L.A., and this really political genius was Yossi Sergeant. He saw this artist there at an art show, and he says, I got an idea. Here's $100. I need this picture turned into this poster with the term hope. And so he commissioned the artist, who then became world famous because of it. And really, Yossi Sergeant was in the background. He was the guy behind the curtain. Brilliant, confessed hardcore leftist activist, because he invited me to his show knowing we were on opposite sides of the political spectrum, but he said, I see your painting as a vision of hope, and I want it in my show. So it was a huge coup for me. I was in Pasadena, California, and this massive show. It was really something. So that was my journey. A lot of it was very interesting. A lot of it was very negative. I had a lot of blowback, a lot of hostility, a lot of hatred, a lot of visceral hatred because of this painting. And my painting is 7 by 15 feet. It's enormous. If you're going to paint something about this guy, you better paint something Trumpian, and it's massive. And that's what it is. And so I did, so it reflects Trump on many, many levels. And it was also a predictive painting saying he'd become president. He's painted as president. And so mockery and scorn, I went through all that for that time. But anyway, to get to the Smithsonian part, and this is where the journey really takes place, after this wonderful political American experience as a newborn citizen, this excitement, I'd always seen those the conventions on television, when they're all there, and the balloons and the cowboy hats and all this. And I was so intrigued. I was like, look at this. This is, in where I come from, it's like, it's nothing. Politics is nothing. Here they have this huge thing, and it's like, and I was like intrigued. Well, I end up being an alternate delegate for Trump from New York State, sitting on the front row of the RNC in 2016 in Cleveland, Ohio. It was amazing. It was just the experience. It was just like, this is so much fun. It's so wild to be this outsider, this newborn citizen enjoying this experience. So it was wonderful, educational, part of my book. All of these experiences contribute to then the election. Trump wins. I'm not surprised. Most people think, oh my goodness, he was right. They stopped laughing at me. They didn't want to talk to me anymore. Now the mockery ended. Now it was real hatred and, visceral animosity after the election win. And then I was like, well, what am I going to do? What do I do now with my painting? And I had met people across the country who would say to me, this should be in the Smithsonian. This needs to be in the Smithsonian. This should be in the. This is what the expression. I was like, Smithsonian. I was like, I heard of it. I thought it was like spaceships and rockets or something. I had no idea. So once I realized, hey, this is like what I heard and where it should go, I began to Google Smithsonian. I didn't know there was an art gallery. Turns out there's a portrait gallery in Washington, D.C. called the Smithsonian National Portrait Gallery. I Googled that, and I'm like, oh, look at this. 2008, it was actually 2009 and 2013, they displayed and received the Obama Hope portrait by Shepard Fairey, not the digitized print of a computer printer, but the Shepard Fairey made 3 screen printed like originals that would carry above the printed version that was just a printout of a printer. He made 3 screen, and they had one version donated to them at the Smithsonian, and they displayed it with a lot of pomp and ceremony for the inauguration. Listen, historic Barack Obama win. It was amazing history. What a story for America. Wonderful, great. They showed this portrait. I met the guy. I had my art. My art was side by side with that in L.A. I'm like, this is great. Political art, two sides of the spectrum. This is wonderful. This is America. Well, I then see, well, what am I going to do? I said, well, I should make an application. So I did. And I'd met a lot of politicians on my journey, and I called them up and said, listen, I want to make a tribute now to this American story I've been on, and a tribute to this man who unelected, and he's now the president and president-elect. I want to submit it to the Smithsonian to show. They, oh, that's a great idea. And I got all these glowing letters of support from public officials and art collectors and a radio host. And so it was a well-supported application. And so I then tried to get it to the right person at the Smithsonian. That's a whole other story. That's really a sort of a precursor to what I was about to walk into. It's all, again, part of my journey and part of my book. So I end up finding the right person who submits it to the director of the Smithsonian National Portrait Gallery, a woman by the name of Kim Sayed. And the next day, I get online and I get the phone number and I call her office and I speak to the secretary and I say, this is Julian Raven. I submitted this, or it was forwarded to you from this person. I was following up to see if there's anything else I would need to do. Here's my number. In good faith, if I can supply anything or help or whatever we need to do to get this processed, I'm right here. And it was like, well, the secretary was like, well, thank you. And that was it. They hang up. About 15 minutes later, Bo, is when my life would change for the next 8 years, when I get a phone call from the same number I just dialed in Washington, D.C., and that number is about to change my life.
You're leaving me in suspense here. What happened?
I answer the phone, and it's an Australian woman. It's Kim Sayed. I didn't know who she was, but I knew now she's Australian, and in a very snooty accent. You're the artist with the painting of the Donald Trump with the eagle and the flag, it's a very dismissive tone. And I said, well, yeah, that's me. And she says, well, it's too big. And she begins to object. And again, this is all part of what I get into in detail. She begins to object to the painting. It's too big, 7 by 15 feet. And I said, well, what are there standards of size? This is the National Portrait Gallery. It's America. It's anything's too big for America type of thing. And she started to sort of get nervous about what she'd said. And she jumps to the next thing. And she says, oh, well, it's not from life. And as a portrait artist, I've painted subjects from life, even myself. When you paint from life, you're sitting right there in front of me in the studio. And that can be a legitimate qualification. But I said to her, but in 2008, or 2009, and 2013, you displayed the Obama Hope poster that I know personally was a photograph from the internet that was photoshopped and turned into this winning campaign political piece of art. It wasn't from life. And this is where it gets really bad. She then says, yes, it was. And she starts defending, and it becomes an 11-minute argument, Bo, with the director of the National Portrait Gallery. I am just this little guy in my basement office in my home, and I'm taken, but I'm going to stand my ground, and I know what I know. When I know something, I'm going to stand by what I know because I knew the guy. I knew the whole story intimately, and this is what's fascinating. In that Obama portrait story, Shepard Fairey was convicted for 6 months for copyright infringement because he took the photograph from Manny Friedman, who was an AP photographer for that news company, took his photograph and used it without permission, and then destroyed all the evidence and lied in court. And he was found guilty, and he had to serve 6 months of community service for that. And, and that experience was, again, I knew it. So here's this woman trying to tell me it was from life, when the guy was convicted from copying it. I mean, it was bizarre. Well, her voice is up here now. She jumps from it was not from life. Now she's like jumping to arbitrary excuse to arbitrary excuse. I didn't think she was expected to find somebody maybe like me who could actually stand my ground. The next thing she says is, "It's too pro-Trump," and I'm like, "Too pro-Trump?" I said, "Well, how can a portrait not be pro the subject? I mean, that's what a portrait is. It's all about the subject."
Right.
Barack Obama poster is all about Barack Obama and his look and his gaze and hope and the message. It's a political. I said, "It's great. That's his politics. Great." No, mine's too pro-Trump. And I'm like, "What in the world?" Then she says, "It's too political." And I said, "Too political?" I said, "You are telling me this is too when you showed a political campaign poster, one of the most famous images in politics on ever in history."
Yeah.
And you're telling me that my painting is too political? I couldn't bear it. And she was obviously an experienced bureaucrat and a museum gallery person, and she, in her tone, you could feel like she wanted to hurt me. I kept refuting her really solidly, and and so she turns around and she goes, "Yeah, I know how hard it is for artists to be rejected," and which is true. If you get legitimately rejected, that's so. But if you just get rejected on a whim, and you brush your side, it can be very sort of, you just feel terrible. So she's like starts to drive this in, and then she says, "Yeah, it's no good." And I said, "It's no good." I said, "My painting is 102 square feet. It's 7 feet tall by 15 feet long. And you're looking at a 4 by 6 inch copy on a computer screen. And you're going to tell me that my painting is no good?" Again, she's recoiling. She's trying to "Well, where is the painting?" And I said, "It's in my studio in upstate New York." "Well, that's like out of range," this type of flippant. It was unreal. But this is how it ends, Bo. She says this to me. She's mad because I've refuted her. I stood my ground, and I was saying she's lied through her teeth. She made stuff up. This woman was a person who was deeply affected by Donald Trump's win, and was just very disturbed by it, to the point where she lost her objectivity in her position, and she took her position as an opportunity to basically come after me, make that call. When I got that call, I was sitting down because I'd called once, and then I'm sitting in my office. When I got that call and I heard her voice, she said who she was, I stood up. I was like, "Oh my goodness!" I'm out of respect for the authority. You pay deference. This is the director of the National Portrait Gallery. I'm like, I didn't expect the call. I expected the secretary to call me. So here's this person, you're extending respect and deference, and she's then using it as a power trip to go after somebody that represents what she hates, and that's what so the final part is this, in a high-pitched tone, angry. She's like, "I'm the director of the National Portrait Gallery. Your application will go no further. You can appeal it all you want." Click. And that's how she ended and I was like, I'm stunned, Bo. This is 8 years ago, and the first chapter of my book, she's the antagonist in the book. The first chapter is called Power and Abuse. And I am a person who has great respect for authority. As a Christian, I believe in God establishing authority. You submit to authority. You show respect to authority. You honor authority. So I have a posture that's very deferential to that. But I've learned the hard way in life that when you have that posture, you are so easily wounded or hurt. You're very vulnerable to then somebody really taking advantage of you. And I felt violated. I stood in my office like I felt violated. I was like, oh my God. I didn't have words. I was like, well, how do I reply to this? My mind was like like went blank. It was a traumatic experience for me emotionally, because all the journey to that moment had been so interesting, and this was so cutting. I mean, it was really something. I was not myself for days. It took me 3 days, I think, to talk to my wife about it, and then she was just blew. She's an American, so she was like, "What in the world?" She got furious. I couldn't believe it. And then a week, 10 days later, when I sort of sobered up a little bit from what had gone on, I'm thinking, well, what am I going to do? And I could just keep hearing in my head, she was saying, "You can appeal it all you want. You can appeal it all you want." And I was like, okay, I'm going to appeal it. And so I'm like, well, who runs the Smithsonian? I start doing the research, and I find the Board of Regents. And the Board of Regents to the Smithsonian Institution in Washington, D.C. has 17 members. And the Chancellor of the Smithsonian Institution is none other than Chief Justice John Roberts of the U.S. Supreme Court. And on the Board of Regents is the Vice President of the United States. Back then it was Joe Biden, 3 members of Congress, 3 members of the House, and 9 members of the public. Super duper famous, successful people in all fields of America, superstars on this Board of Regents. And so I was like, oh, appeal it. I will appeal it right now. And I draft my appeal. I wrote down what she had said to me within the hour. I jotted down the things she said. I wrote it all out. I then added the application. I added the letters from all the congressmen and senators and all these people, the whole package, and prints and big copies of the painting. And I mail off 17 copies of those things to the Smithsonian Castle in Washington, D.C., to all these people. And I'm thinking, yeah, well, they're gonna read this and blow a gasket. How dare they treat this guy like this? You're thinking, this is John Roberts. I mean, he's the highest ranking judicial officer in the nation. He'll be able to see that immediately and see this is just outrageous. Well, I don't hear anything for like 10, 12 days, and I get a letter in the mail from the Smithsonian Institution, and my heart's pounding. I'm like, oh, here it is. Here's a letter. What's going to happen? What they're going to say? And it's from a guy named Richard Curran, Dr. Richard Curran, who basically says they had got the letter handed to him. He said he received his letter from the Board of Regents, not my appeal, no mention of appeal. He goes into a little waffling paragraph about, oh, well, we have this tradition, and we already had selected a picture for Trump, and it's not true at all. And he says, I talked to Kim Sayet. I agreed with everything she said. Goodbye. And basically another hanging up on the phone. So it was the letter, very short, and I was like, he didn't even look at my appeal. He didn't adjudicate my appeal. He didn't he just agreed with what she said and did, and it was stunning to me. It was absolutely stunning. So I was then left again, like, what do I do? And again, I think going back to what I shared with you at the beginning is the type of person that I am. I try to make sense of how things work and try to understand it. And so when this becomes like a big, like someone just jammed a screwdriver into the engine and it sparks, I'm like, well, I want to see what's going on here and how does it function. And so I then start to look about appealing it further. And that's when I go and join the federal court system to appeal my case now in federal court. And I'm just a simple guy. I don't have funds to hire a lawyer. I'm going to do this myself. And so I did. I started reading and studying, and I started to sue them myself. And I celebrated this, Bo, as being an American citizen because I was thrilled, again, going back to the laws of this country that give us these remarkable rights as citizens, that we can redress. The whole point of our country is the right to redress governments when we're abused, as the whole ideas of our founding is based upon the abuse of power, the tyrant in England, the King George tyrant, and the nation appealing and seeking redress. That's fundamental to who we are as a people. So I'm like, well, I'm going to do that. I'm going to be an American through and through, and I'm going to do this. So, and I did, and I went on a journey. Then that was my education for the next really 8 years because I'm still on it, and it's still unresolved. There's a lot of details in the book about the Smithsonian Institution that, again, this is another facet of the journey that really became the focus, meaning I became exposed to what the Smithsonian Institution is, and because of all of the research, I was suddenly looking at stuff saying, oh my goodness, look at this, look at this. And that becomes then a major thrust in what I continue to do today.
So what do you think, how do I word this question? Like, what do you, if you were denied, well, you were denied, but what denial would have left you with, okay, fair enough, and moved on and carried on with your life without going down this journey?
In which,
what
at the Smithsonian, first of all?
At the Smithsonian, yeah.
Well, first of all, if you, at that level of institution, you would, at a minimum, have an official consideration of your work. That would be based upon written standards of portraiture acceptance that would be held up against your work, and then crossed off. Did it qualify? Did it qualify? Yes, no, yes, no. And then they would reply to you in writing, dear Mr. Raven, thank you for your application. If it was a negative, it would have been, we're sorry, but based upon our standards, this is where your portrait just doesn't meet the bar.
I see.
That's a legitimate way. Now, this is the interesting part about the journey, Bo, is that I'm doing furious research about what this institution is, and I find the establishment of the portrait gallery in the 60s, 1963, I think it is, and I find the black and white standards of portraiture acceptance in that gallery, and she violated it all. And that made me mad even more, because she was making up arbitrary reasons. And the most important thing that we need to, and this is part of my journey now as an American, part of my book, a huge thrust of my book is the educating and sharing with my fellow Americans what the Smithsonian Institution is. See, the Smithsonian Institution, that's why it's called Smithsonian Institution, is a private charitable trust. It is not a government institution. The government of the United States is the trustee of the trust, but the trust comes from a British guy in England who gave his money to the United States. I just wrote a blog about it again today. It's a private trust, and as a trust, trusts are built and established in honor of the testator, whether living or dead, and they are to fulfill, and it says in the Act of Congress of 1846, when Congress said they accept the responsibility to be trustee, only trustee of the Smithsonian Institution, they say to carry out the will of the enlightened donor, and that's how they put it. So the Smithsonian will, James Smithson, and I made a very sarcastic and facetious story about him today. I have a whole thing. That's another story, but his will at the end of it is this. It's very simple. And that is, he says that he gives his whole fortune to the United States to found at Washington, D.C., an institution for the increase and diffusion of knowledge. That's what its mission is. And it's to be called the Smithsonian Institution. His name was Smithson. So this is me giving my fortune. So you build and establish a huge institution for me, put my name on the top of it, and I'm never forgotten. He's the bastard son of British royalty who was rejected in England, had to live in Europe. It was a whole story there. It's an amazing story. I wrote about it today. It was fascinating. Now you want to hear irony? It's his wealth, which nobody knows actually where it comes from, must be, I concluded, from his parents who were, people who committed adultery, basically, and had him out of wedlock in Europe. He couldn't go to England. He was a bastard child under the Victorian system. He could not be accepted anywhere. He had to live in Europe and die. He was born in Paris and died in Genoa, Italy. He was totally outside of England because of that. And because of that, his money obviously was not able to be used or welcomed. So that's why he sent it to the United States. And for that reason, then obviously they become trustees of his will, which was for the increase and diffusion of knowledge. So the Smithsonian Institution and everything that it is today, in every department, it exists primarily for the increase and diffusion of knowledge. So in a letter of consideration of my portrait, I found the standards online in the Smithsonian Institution where they said we must consider whether this artifact fills a gap in the historic record, basically. It fills a gap in the knowledge record. And so they would have to assess that, look at my portrait. They did it with the Obama painting, his wonderful story. And then they had to weigh mine in the balance and say, well, is Mr. Raven's any different? And so that would be the first. And if they said, that we had another one and it really was more representative of that, that would be at their discretion to decide that. But they didn't. Mine was the only one. And as proof of this, when she said to me, it's no good, the Smithsonian National Portrait Gallery specifically says that the merit of a painting, in other words, the goodness of it, whether it's a good or a bad painting, has no consideration. Neither the prominence of the artist. They said that we operate like no other gallery. Our gallery operates specifically and primarily for the increase and diffusion of knowledge, basically, but in the area in America of recording American history through portraits, pictures of American citizens who have affected and impacted the culture and history of the United States. That is the guiding principle of knowledge increase under that institution of art within the Smithsonian Institution. So all of those areas need to be considered. None of them were, because she violated all of them. She made stuff up. She objected to this and objected to that. And I even found when she said it's not from life, she was being half true, because the black and white standards said portraits must be from life, comma, if possible. And so they had the little space there for it doesn't always have to be from life. So if you cut it off, you can say it has to be from life. Yeah, but you've already violated that because you had Shepard Fairey's painting here. So you've already created space for mine. So I meticulously went through this, and this became part of my legal arguments in federal court. Now, in federal court, the argument now becomes about rights, participatory rights in a trust, and whether we as American citizens have free speech, artistic expressive rights inside of the Smithsonian Institution. And I argued that. I found cases to support, Supreme Court precedents that support it. I found the most amazing. I mean, when I go back to the title of your broadcast, the overcoming and the pursuit of truth. You know what? I had some dark days. I've still had some of the most discouraging times of my life on this journey. And in the book, I write the book in such a way that it's an allegory, because I wanted it to look like a novel. I wanted it to look like a Greek tragedy, something that when you look at the cover of it, it's like, is this a nonfiction? It looks like it's something, because I wrote it in a parallel way, because I knew that if I presented all of the facts and the history and the documents, people would be like, oh my goodness. So I wrote it so that as I present those, running parallel with it is an allegory of me on this adventure with beasts and mountains and climbing and falling and struggling and so typifying the emotional journey of these terribly discouraging moments that I would experience, but then these remarkable moments of light and these moments of like revelation. I was like, oh my God, I'm not just right, I'm right. I'm like completely right. I found lawsuits that were just like golden. I mean, talk about when you're in that place where you don't know what you're really doing, which I didn't. I was flying by the seat of my pants. But then you find vindication along the way, and it's the sweetest taste of anything in your life, because you feel so downtrodden and so discouraged and so in darkness. And it is a light. It is a blazing light. And one of the cases, for example, it's called LeBron versus Amtrak. It's a wonderful case about an artist. Again, it was so parallel to mine, but an artist from a different political perspective. He was technically a Democrat. I was technically a Republican at the time, who goes into Penn Station in New York City and wants to have artwork displayed on this massive screen that they have. They rejected him. It's Amtrak. He sues them. Free speech lawsuit goes to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court says he absolutely has free speech rights. And because Amtrak, even though it's a government-created corporation, in court they were arguing, well, we're completely private. We are completely private, which is really true for a lot of it. And yet, when it came to the Supreme Court, they said, yes, but your board, the board of directors that controls Amtrak, is appointed by the federal government.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and so because of that, the free speech rights, the Constitution extends into Amtrak. And the guy won. And he won and so I'm waiving that case saying, this is the same for me. But you know what the difference is? Nobody has ever sued the Smithsonian like I have, especially to the U.S. Supreme Court. And so the big question that today remains unanswered, and I've had, up until today, I've had 3 petitions at the U.S. Supreme Court. I'm on my 3rd. It's still there. I've been denied and denied. Up until today, they have refused to answer this unanswered question of federal law, which is, what is the legal entity status of the Smithsonian Institution? In other words, what is it when it comes to the Constitution? What is it when it comes to rights of citizens who enter in through its doors? The Smithsonian is clearly a private charitable trust. It's clearly. But it's run by a board of regents that's appointed by Congress. So it has, again, this congressional oversight that makes it liable to the U.S. Constitution. That question they've never answered. And I think it's because Justice John Roberts sits on the board. And it's so tightly knit with Washington, D.C., that I'm this little guy. And they're like, you know what? Let's flick him off the side of the boat. Flick this guy, get this guy out of here. We're not answering this question. And yet I have remained doggedly persistent and continue to this day. And I'm in the process of even filing maybe another lawsuit that I am determined to compel the U.S. Supreme Court just to answer that question. Like you did in LeBron versus Amtrak, there was this other Supreme Court case of another trust, a private trust in Philadelphia, perfectly aligns with my case. Like you did in these cases, you must answer this question for the American people, because this museum was given to us. It was given to the American people, not to the government. The government is the trustee of an institution to serve the American people. So we would like to know, do we have free speech rights in the Smithsonian? And that can only happen if you guys say what the Smithsonian is and what laws it must abide by. And that, my friend, is where I find myself today.
So let me ask you this. Since you were, let's say well connected with, higher ups, politicians during the Trump campaign, you even met Trump, you were a delegate for Trump. You don't think you could pull like some weight or be able to network to be able to even get, Trump to have an opinion on this, or have Trump force his hand in some way?
It's a good question, and it has some really good answers. The first answer is, I am a very, I would say, persistently stubborn person, meaning I believe in the truth. I believe that truth must stand by itself and be clearly identifiable as the truth without any external help, without anyone's fingers on the scales of justice. I had people say the same thing to me for years, and I would say, yeah, but, if you do that, is it really justice? And the truth of the matter, what you're saying is that it speaks of another truth, which is the American legal system, which I've learned painfully, only functions when you have that type of influence on the case.
Yes.
So you're absolutely right about that. But again, it's me, and I'm the type of guy that says, I love the truth, and this is the truth. And anybody that sees it should say that and say, well, that's the truth, and it's beautiful. Don't touch it. The Lady Justice is blindfolded. It's right, and it's just because it's right and it's just. You don't need anybody to. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That's me, and that's And
Yeah.
that causes me to go on my journey and suffer a lot. But the other side of what you just said was answered this month. Now, this is going on 8 years. It's been front page news, whether the Washington Times had it on the front page. In 2019, I had really huge coverage of it. Most people laughed at me. They mocked me. They're like, who do you think you are? Who do you think you are? How dare you sue the Smithsonian? They just think I'm this sort of, outlier. That you're this sort of, you're just, and you're a fringe actor, because and I'm representing myself and all this. I'm like, yeah, well, I'm an American. That's all I care about. I'm an American, and I love this country, and I love the laws that's allowing me to do this. So I'm just going to do it, and I'm going to keep marching along my little path. And that's what I've been doing. But this year, even after a year and a half in Spain and having many seasons of discouragement and, oh my goodness, why and when, I've still been suing them. I had a second lawsuit, right up until the beginning of this year. The news, May 30th, and I was in Spain, and I just came back May 5th. And this is remarkable because May 5th until May 30th is like less than 3 weeks probably. I'm lying in bed, and I read in the Daily Mail, Donald Trump fires Kim Sayed. So yeah, it's been national news. He fired her. And then the Washington Post calls me up the next day, and they're like, Mr. Raven, you're number 4 on the president's list of 17 reasons to fire Kim Sayed. What do you have to say about that? And I said, well, first of all, he doesn't have the authority to fire Kim Sayed because it's a private trust, which is true. The federal government, I said, but he did what was right. He poked the bear. He had, he's the president-elect. I mean, he's the elected president. So in a way, he has the total right to weigh in on it. So
Sure.
He tries to fire her. She goes back to work, like in defiance. The Smithsonian folds its arm and doesn't say anything. And then they had a Board of Regents meeting on June 10th. And I went to D.C. and I held a press conference for me and the journalists from the Washington Post. No other journalists wanted to turn up. The people instinctively defend the institution and her against me. They think I'm the bad guy. I'm the perp. I'm the guy that's you're mean. You're the mean and the mean president that's trying to fire her. And he said many people have told me that she's highly partisan. And so this is all now in my favor because the judge in my case, even though he dismissed my case, this is the first time, he said that, and this is so convoluted, he said that Kim Sayed's actions were odious. That's part of the title of my book, hateful, and partisan. So he condemns her for being odious and partisan, but he said it's perfectly legal what she did. And you're like, yeah, you got to be crazy. So the president now said she's partisan. He fires her. She doesn't leave. The Board of Regents get together. They have their meeting. The Washington Post interviews me. I said, they're not going to fire her, but they're going to force her to resign because now federal funds are being threatened, and blah, 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 blah. The gaze of the president, he's lost confidence. This is major attention to what I've been doing. And sure enough, 2 days later, she resigned. And so I'm really I'm only like doing these podcasts right now. I've been doing them with this other site and this and yourself because I felt really encouraged, whereas I was so bummed out for so long because I wrote my book. It's this incredible book, and people are like, yeah, well, whatever, it's just guy. You're like poking a beast, and no one cares. I've learned in this life, and I think history testifies to this, that no one's going to take me seriously, really, until something like this that just happens. But even with that, only the Washington Post that was echoed in ABC News a little bit, and a few of the Guardian, a few little media outlets. Most of them, they covered the story. Every news outlet nearly in the world, I think, did. They pointed to the president basically as the mean president trying to fire this director who's such a nice lady, and they ignore the story that's documented throughout the media for the last 8 years of how she in court was determined by a judge to be both odious and partisan, and he said she was highly partisan, so he was absolutely right, but they don't want to give him any credence, so they have to ignore that part of the story and ignore me in the process. So going back to that question, you are absolutely right. It is a very discouraging thing to learn for me. I am not the type of person to ask anybody to do that because again, if it's right, you just should be right. Like what the president did, pointing to 8 years later. It's like, well, you should have done it 8 years ago because this started 8 years ago. This woman, Bo, when Trump was inaugurated on January 20th, 2017, she marched in a protest rally in Washington, D.C. against the inauguration with the Women's March, and she tweeted all these selfies at the march to the Smithsonian website and revealed her animus and her bias right there. And that led to a whole other convoluted thing of corruption, and they try to change the website, and they all this stuff. It's awful. She's gone now, which is great, but the question remains unanswered, and that question remains before the American people. And that's why I'm doing this. I have a burden and passion because I think it's a wonderful story. I think the institution is a wonderful institution with a noble objective, but it needs to be run in a way that benefits all Americans, not just the ideology of a few who are inside there, because that's what it is, and that's where the president's come out against that they have an ideology that's twisted, which is true. And so it needs reform. It's an institution that needs complete reform, function correctly according to its mission, and serve all of the American people with different viewpoints. And that's America. That's beautiful. But not partisan ideologues who are in there building a wall, insulating themselves from the world, and then drumming their agenda, and then doing those things to me, which they did because I don't fit their agenda. That's just wrong. It's illegal.
Well, that's politics, right? I mean, that's been going on since like the dawn of man, right? Yep. It's just whatever your agenda is, and it doesn't matter what side you're on, right, left, independent, however, whatever you want to call it. It's like an onion. You just keep peeling layers upon layers upon layers of just bullshit, and there's no more. Yeah. I read something recently that was like, it kind of hit me because, kind of what you mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, where our founding fathers created the United States with the notion that none of this bullshit would happen. And I think if the founding fathers saw what goes on today, they'd be disgusted. Oh, yeah. Now, granted, the founding fathers had their own issues, issues as well, sure, but that was kind of life back then, not whether it was right or wrong, right? But still, like when you get ego and money involved, it's just it fascinates me what politics does to cultures, societies, to people. Yeah, and then you read all the time is these people that have all the money in the world. It's really, when you get to a certain level, it's not about money; it's about power. And man, that's such a. I applaud you, especially that you're doing this all on your own as well. You haven't hired an attorney, and you're learning. You know what even surprises me even more is that. Typically speaking, I'm generalizing here, but generally speaking, people that are creatives like you, artists, they're more of the, give love, receive love. They're not on the Republican side where you are. I find that kind of fascinating.
I'm politically homeless right now. I don't consider myself. I may have conservative values, but I was associated with them and no more. Absolutely no more.
I get that. I could see why.
Oh yeah.
For sure.
No, it just sickens me. So again, I'm the type of person that, with my own shortcomings and failures and faults, I'm the type of person to say, listen, if you have a job to do, you be honest about it and you do your job. If you fail in the job, you just pick up, you say you're sorry, you fix what you did, and you move on and you keep doing it. But you don't use your position for another purpose that you're subtly like you just pointed out. And this is what happens. And this is what happened at the Smithsonian. And so when I come up against that, it just sickens me. It's like saying, no, it's like even in the, as a Christian, I've been in ministry for many years in different capacities. It's the same. It's the human heart. We're all susceptible. Nobody is exempt. We're all susceptible to that, the temptation of power and pride and all this stuff. And it's like, listen, those, God gives those things to men to serve other people with, to help benefit other
Yeah.
people. You can be an amazing person who God may give you wealth or position or status, and you can use that to serve your fellow man and change the world, or you can hoard it all for yourself because you think you're so important. It's like, well, you're going to die. You're going to be eaten by worms. I mean, get a grip. I mean, that's reality. That's coming. And it's like those realities are, to me, they're very clear. And it's like, if you should have that opportunity or that privilege or responsibility, use it in a way that lifts and exalts both truth and your fellow man. We could imagine if everyone just a little bit in the whole world, you'd have a different world, but our nature's not like that. And people, they want to take and get. And I have fought against that in myself. And obviously an opportunity to fight against it as an American. And I came to the conclusion, and I've always had this as a mindset anyway, it's my personality, but when I became an American and I had to swear, you see, the ceremony is like a wedding ceremony. When you become an American,
Yep.
you reject and renounce where you've come from, all allegiance to the king and anything you've had, and from where I come from, and then you swear allegiance and to defend the U.S. Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and the laws of this country. And so you're committing yourself to be actively involved in the development, growth, life, and protection of what you have become part of. I can't just sit there and say, oh, great, now I just go out and take care of myself. That's not who I am. And so I didn't look for this battle. I didn't go looking for it. I was stunned when it happened. But I'm made for it. I'm wired for it. This makes me think on all the different levels, love of learning and knowledge. And, the Smithsonian Institution is about the increase and diffusion of knowledge. It's great. There's so many levels. There's so many interesting levels to this that are fulfilling. But then there's also that sort of citizen civic duty to say, and I say this to other folks, because we can in America. You can go to country after country across this world, even where I grew up in Spain. Beautiful, beautiful culture. The people are beautiful, simple, loving, party, happy, food, wine. It's beautiful. But when you start talking to them about their country or the government, they are frustrated. They can't do anything about it. They're so good at the rest of the stuff because they don't even bother dealing with the country because they can't have an impact in the political system. It's pointless. Whereas in America, we the common people, we the people, it's our obligation by the statement, we the people. It's us. Americans are part of that engine. And so when I swore this oath and became an American citizen, I was already painting the painting. But once this battle came along, and to make it even worse, Kim Sayed is not even an American. She's a Dutch woman with an Australian passport. And here you have a foreigner booting out of an American museum a guy with a painting of an American man and story with an American flag saying it's this, that, and the other. And she's a foreigner? I mean, it's outrageous to me. It's just absolutely outrageous. So I like to try and make things straight, and I have been on this journey here, and it's not over.